Hello everyone! Today, I'd like to go over a budget commander deck that I built around Doran, the Siege Tower, an Abzan commander originally printed in Lorwyn, but was recently reprinted in Double Masters. I've kept the price of this deck under $35 using prices listed by Scryfall. This includes the cost of basic lands at 10 cents a piece, but does not include the cost of shipping. As always, the link to the deck list will be in the description down below. Now let's get into the deck. So, our commander, Doran the Siege Tower, is a 0/5 Treefolk Shaman for Abzan colors, or a white, a black, and a green, and reads, each creature assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power. So Doran has a pretty straightforward deck design philosophy, as we really only need to care about the toughness of our creatures and can completely disregard power. However, since Doran affects all creatures and not just our own, this has the potential to really mess up our opponent's game plans. So our game plan is pretty straightforward. We're going to start with a whole bunch of low mana cost, high toughness creatures that can act as blockers if we don't have Doran out. But between mana acceleration and our lands, we're going to also look to color fix to get Doran out ASAP. He only costs 3 mana, but you need to get those 3 colors down. And once we get Doran out, those high toughness blockers suddenly become big hitters with big health pools. We'll also look to buff our creatures further, particularly looking for spells that increase our creatures' toughness or give them abilities to help us get past enemy defenses. But ultimately, we'll be looking to use these big creatures to bonk people. So let's start into the 99 by talking about color fixing and mana acceleration. To start, we have Wayfarer's Bauble, Armillary Sphere, and Urban Utopia. Wayfarer's Bauble lets you search your library for a basic land card that enters the battlefield tapped. Armillary Sphere lets you search your library for 2 basic land cards, which you reveal and then put into your hand. And Urban Utopia lets you enchant a land and then gives that land tap to add 1 mana of any color, effectively making it so you can turn a basic land into a command tower. We also have Fellwar Stone and Arcane Signet, where Fellwar Stone taps for mana of any color that a land an opponent controls could produce, which will frequently be any color we need, and Arcane Signet taps for mana of any color in your commander's color identity. And finally, we have the Signets, Selesnya Signet, Golgari Signet, and Orzhov Signet, each of which converts 1 generic mana into 2 differently colored mana. Now that we have many of the tools to help ensure that we have the necessary colors of mana available, let's go over our high toughness creatures, which will mostly act as hard to get past defenders at the start, but will turn into powerful attackers once Doran hits the field. First up, we have some vanilla creatures with high toughness. This includes Yoked Ox, Tasseled Dromedary, Dune Beetle, and Grizzled Leotau. We also have Giant Ox and Moldgraf Scavenger, whose abilities don't really have a huge effect in this deck, so may as well be vanilla. Similarly, we have God Pharaoh's Faithful, Lagona Band Trailblazer, and Ironroot Warlord. Now, even though these are all effectively vanilla creatures, they're all very low CMC, and once Doran's on the field, something like a Giant Ox effectively acts as a 6/6 for 2 mana. However, not all of our high toughness creatures are effectively vanilla. We also have some creatures like Makindi Aeronaut, which has flying, Disowned Ancestor with Outlast, allowing it to buff itself, Soulless Jailer, which can really slow down opponents playing graveyard-based decks, as it prevents them from playing a lot of things from graveyards. We also have Dusk Shell Crawler, which when it ETBs, it lets us put a +1/+1 counter on a target creature, and gives each creature we control with +1/+1 counters trample. This goes well with something like Gluttonous Slug with Menace, meaning any opponent that wishes to block it has to use 2 or more creatures to block, and Evolve, meaning whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, if it has greater power or toughness than this creature, we put a +1/+1 counter on Gluttonous Slug. We also have Nyx Fleece Ram, a 0/5 that gives you 1 life at the beginning of your upkeep, Magnagoth Treefolk, which gets Landwalk for each type of basic land you control, which can be fairly hard for opponents to block as there's a high likelihood of you getting access to Forest Walk, Planeswalk, and Swamp Walk by the time this comes out. And finally, we have Saproling of Kulfner, which has Indestructible, and when Saproling of Kulfner attacks, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature card, you gain life equal to that creature's toughness, lose life equal to its power, and then put it in your hand. Now let's look at some of the buffs that we can apply to our creatures. First up, we have a bunch of auras, such as Gift of Granite, which gives a creature +2 toughness, Glaring Aegis, which will tap an opponent's creature when it ETBs, and gives its enchanted creature +3 toughness, Chosen by Heliod, which gives +2 toughness and has you draw a card when it ETBs, Conviction, which gives its enchanted creature +3 toughness, But additionally, for 1 white mana, you can return Conviction to its owner's hand. So if its enchanted creature dies, instead of having the aura fizzle, you can bring it to your hand and cast it later. We also have Elendumbra, which gives its enchanted creature +4 toughness, and Totem Armor, which, if its enchanted creature would be destroyed, instead remove all damage from it and destroy this aura. Hero's Resolve, which gives its enchanted creature +5 toughness. Warbriar Blessing, which gives its enchanted creature +2 toughness, but additionally, when it ETBs, its enchanted creature fights up to 1 target creature you don't control, so this could help you deal with a problem creature depending on its size. There's also Mantle of Webs, which gives its enchanted creature +3 toughness and reach. Aspect of Gorgon, which gives its enchanted creature +3 toughness and Death Touch. And finally for auras, we have Stoneskin, which has Flash and gives its enchanted creature +10 toughness. Though when Doran's on the field, it's more like it's giving a creature +10/+10 for 3 mana. And if you put it on Doran, you effectively have a 15/15 commander. We also have an equipment spell in Slagworm Armor, which gives its equipped creature +6 toughness. Now all of the spells talked about so far affect a single creature, but we could look for some Anthem effects as well. First up we have Tower Defense, an instant that gives all of our creatures +5 toughness and reach until the end of the turn. We also have Veteran Armorer, Blessed Orator, and Glory Bearers. The first 2 being general Anthem effects giving other creatures we control +1 toughness, and Glory Bearers gives +1 toughness to attacking creatures that we control. We also have Glorious Sunrise, a bit of a Swiss Army knife of an enchantment that at the beginning of our combat we get to choose between 1 of 4 potential effects. However, in this deck, we're mostly going to be choosing the first effect with creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain trample until the end of the turn, as that trample is really going to help ensure that we get damage through. We also have Conclave Guildmage, which for 1 green mana can be tapped to give creatures we control trample until the end of the turn. Brave the Sands, which gives creatures we control vigilance, and additionally, creatures we control can block an additional creature. And finally, we have Behind the Scenes, which gives creatures we control Skulk, which means they can't be blocked by creatures with greater power. Now the thing is, the vast majority of the creatures in our deck have 0 or 1 power. So with Behind the Scenes on the field, the vast majority of our creatures are going to be pretty much unblockable, but due to their toughness, they'll still assign massive combat damage. Now let's start looking at cards that'll help us refill our hand. Now this deck is going to be playing a lot of enchantments, as there's 24 of them throughout this deck. So that means we can make good use of cards like Sithis, Harvest Hand, Mesa Enchantress, Satyr Enchanter, Eidolon of Blossoms, and Enchantress's Presence. All of which basically say the same thing, which is, whenever you cast an enchantment spell, draw a card. And just having a couple of these on the board can give you a pretty big draw engine. We also have Mentor of the Meek, which, whenever another creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield under your control, you can pay 1 generic mana, which lets you draw a card. And this will come into play with just about any creature in our deck. We also have Sixth Sense and Snake Umbra, which both state whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. Snake Umbra additionally gives its enchanted creature Totem Armor. There's also Siphon Mind, which makes each other player discard a card, and then you draw a card for each card discarded this way, which will frequently get you 3 cards. And we have Underworld Connections, Greed, and Phyrexian Arena. Underworld Connections has you enchant a land, which gives it tap, pay a life, draw a card. Greed lets you draw a card for 2 life and a black mana. And Phyrexian Arena has you draw a card and lose 1 life at the beginning of your upkeep. Now let's look at the cards that'll let us interact with what our opponents are doing. First up, we have Swords to Plowshares and Dire Tactics, both of which let us exile a target creature. With Swords to Plowshares, the creature's controller gains life equals to its power, and with Dire Tactics, if we don't control a human, which frequently we won't, you lose life equal to that creature's toughness. We also have Doomblade and Go for the Throat, where Doomblade destroys a target non-black creature, and Go for the Throat destroys target non-artifact creature. There's also Naturalize and Return to Nature, both of which can let us destroy a target artifact or enchantment, and Return to Nature gives us the additional option to exile a target card from a graveyard. And finally we have Fog, which is an instant for 1 green mana that lets us prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn. And now that we've gone through all the spells in our deck, let's go to our lands. First up, we have 4 Scry lands with Crystal Grotto, Temple of Plenty, Temple of Silence, and Temple of Malady, all of which let us scry one when they enter the battlefield. We also have some reveal lands with Fortified Village, Shine Shadow Snarl, and Necroblossom Snarl, each of which can enter the battlefield untapped if you reveal a specific type of land card from your hand, for example, a forest or a plains card for Fortified Village. We also have our bounce lands in Golgari Rot Farm, Selesnya Sanctuary, and Orzhov Basilica, each of which will have you return a land to your hand when it enters the battlefield, but they tap for 2 colored mana. We also have the Thriving lands with Thriving Heath, Thriving Moor, and Thriving Grove. These are dual tap lands that let you choose the second color that the land taps for, and can be really handy for color fixing. Also useful for color fixing are cards like Evolving Wilds, Terramorphic Expanse, and Ash Barrens. Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic Expanse are effectively reskins of each other, and they can be tapped and sacked to let you search your library for a basic land card which enters the battlefield tapped. And Ash Barrens has basic land cycling for 1 generic mana, having you discard Ash Barrens and search your library for a basic land card that you then reveal and put in your hand. We also have Canopy Vista, which taps for green or white and enters the battlefield tapped unless you control 2 or more basic lands. Sandstep Citadel, which taps for white, black, or green mana. And a commander staple, Command Tower, which adds mana of any color in your commander's color identity. And then we'll round out our deck with 7 plains, 6 forests, and 4 swamps. Now let's look at the cost breakdown of this deck. And as you can see, this deck costs around $34. Again, this price includes the cost of basic lands at 10 cents a piece, but it won't include the cost of shipping. Now if you want to increase your budget a little bit more, here's a few other options to consider subbing into the deck. There's Spider Silk Armor, which gives all of our creatures +1 toughness and reach. Faber Elder, which can be a very consistent mana dork. Indomitable Ancients, which is a vanilla creature with 10 toughness, but with Doran on the board, it's effectively a 10/10. And finally, Tree of Perdition, which is a defender creature that starts with 13 toughness, but it can be tapped to exchange a target opponent's life total with Tree of Perdition's toughness, which means this could take somebody down from, say, 40 life down to 13 life. But that would also make Tree of Perdition a 0/40, and therefore when it blocks with Doran on the board, it'll also deal 40 damage to whatever creature it's blocking. Regardless, if you'd like to build, play with, or adapt this deck, the list is linked in the description down below. If you liked the video, consider giving it a like, and if you'd like more budget commander decks, consider subbing to the channel. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.